Welcome to the Mayor and City Council special meeting Wednesday, May 21st, 2025. If you'd please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Please show all council persons present. Next up, we have council member statement regarding conflicts of interest on agenda items. Would any council persons like to make a statement regarding that? Hearing none and proceeding forward. Public comment pertaining to non-agenda items. Do we have any public comment pertaining to non-agenda items today? Seeing no movement, I'm proceeding forward. Resolution, ordinances, and agreements. Up first, we have adoption of ordinance 10-2025, city attorney requirements. There were no changes from the introduction, and I am looking for a motion in regards to it. Motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt.
I'm looking for a second.
Second.
Any further comments, questions, concerns by council?
I have a couple of comments. Oh, you want to go ahead? So under power and duties, it says new to the city attorney legal wire. Such duties in this connection may be required when requested by the mayor, city manager, or city council. When required by the mayor or city manager, the city attorney shall furnish written or verbal opinions upon any legal affairs of the city. And I believe that council should be interjected there also after city manager.
I'm fine with that. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
He's right. Yeah.
Right.
yeah.
Okay. Then the other, the second one that I have three. The second one that I have relating to paragraph 2 under C, powers and duties. City attorney shall review and provide legal sufficiency opinions on ordinance, yada, 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 only when specifically requested to do so by mayor, city manager, or city council. If he's not being requested to review ordinances and legal agreements, who is doing that? And are we engaging, if we're providing, especially in terms of the ordinances and legal sufficiency, are we then engaging in the practice of law without a license? Because if we're providing an opinion on legal sufficiency, that has to come from a bar-admitted attorney.
So technically, code, contracts, agreements, bond, leases, and other legal documents of the city do not need legal sufficiency as it's not required by the charter. The only reason, I mean, you can ask a city attorney to provide the legal sufficiency on those documents. For instance, you can actually do a charter amendment without legal sufficiency, which is higher than a code change or a contract or anything like that. The only reason that we currently have it required is because it's required by our code currently. But the charter doesn't make that requirement. This was something that was added later down the road when they added the city attorney position, because there's towns who do operate without an appointed city attorney. What's basically happening here, and one of the reasons this was suggested, was to make sure that, I mean, there's stuff where we're changing a word, a verbiage in code, in a contract that has no detrimental effect to the actual language. And there's even ordinances that we know that are lawful and can go through that we don't need city attorney review for. We're basically wasting taxpayer money to do it when it's not required. And not only that, it also gets hung up. I mean, there's a queue of items, even currently, for items to get done at the city for the city attorney. So I think the idea here is to basically kind of backtrack that a bit to where if the council as a body decides that they want legal review on something, or they want the city attorney at a meeting, they can make that request. The same thing with the city manager. If he sees an ordinance and he's like, I don't feel comfortable with this, we need to get legal opinion, the city manager can make that request. The mayor could make that request. And then the next thing would be, you know, let's say you're an individual council person, you could go to the city manager and be like, hey, you know, explain the reason, explain why you think a legal review would be needed, and the city manager can also make that request. The idea is to kind of cut back on frivolous spending of an attorney who costs, anywhere between $200 to $250 an hour, and you're going to get charged for at least 15 minutes of that time by just sending a simple email, when most of these questions can realistically be answered by the city manager. That's why we have paid staff to answer a lot of these questions. So it's really trying to curtail some of the frivolous spending, I'd say, on legal fees and things of that nature. But again, you don't have to interpret the law. Your council, your legislators, you make the law. If you really think something is on the edge of legal sufficiency, you can request that. And again, you have a city manager who should also bring that up if he's feeling that it isn't meeting that need, which is something like when we talked about the sign ordinance, for instance. There were some legal surety questions there, in which case we were like, hey, let's go back and get some legal surety on that as well. But you don't need it for every document that goes before the city. And not only that, it's still given the council, it's still given the city manager and the mayor to make those requests. So you're still able to make those requests. It's just basically cutting back on things getting tied up in a queue.
And I'm not opposed to saving the city money. I just want to make sure that we are not putting the city in jeopardy by engaging in practice we shouldn't be. That's, I believe, I did not go back and find specifically where in code it says, but I thought that there was something in code about all ordinances had to be reviewed for legal sufficiency.
That's what this is changing. So in code is where it made that requirement. It's not required per charter or per state, for instance. That's just something that was added down the road. And basically, it's kind of the final tie-up of, I would say, if a city attorney doesn't agree with something to council or something's trying to get pushed, that's a way that they could basically fight back on that, would be that legal sufficiency, whether it's right or wrong. But the general idea behind all this, at least, would be that we have plenty of documents that currently get tied up and needing legal sufficiency. We're paying money to do it when we know full well that we have the city manager, for instance, who is the authorized individual per the charter to do contracts, but now they also still have to go for legal sufficiency and spend that money. And some of these contracts are pretty cut and dry. It's the same thing for ordinances. There's ordinances that we do here that are pretty cut and dry. Think of the annual, water, or the monthly water allocation. That's technically an ordinance. That has to go for legal sufficiency. So that's money being spent there as well. And again, this is still allowing that tool to be used by city council, the city manager, and the mayor. And like I said, an individual council person, this is how it's supposed to have been going from even before this, was that if an individual council person had a legal concern, they'd go to the city manager, talk it out, and again, if that legal concern was valid or definitely appropriate, or the city manager couldn't answer that question, then it would get sent to legal, because it doesn't make sense to basically individual people being able to bill the city at a cost of $250 an hour or $200 an hour, depending on your attorney, or more. And again, this isn't to get around that requirement, but there's plenty that we do, and even all of this stuff on this list today, none of it is particularly, what would be the proper word? There's not a lot of legalese to it. You are the legislators. You can legislate. And again, the same way that this was added through a city council making an attorney position saying they wanted legal review on every document. You can go back and say you don't want legal review on every document.
And I think in my mind, to deal with kind of the gist of what you're getting at, is it specifically says that council can request these legal reviews, right? So like there's a mechanism that if as the body of council feel like we need legal review on any specific thing or any slate of things, then we request it, and we have the mechanism of getting it. So more about not wasting time and resources on things that don't
like I
need to
said, I'm not opposed to saving money and not preventing the waste of resources. I just don't want to leave the city at
Yeah. Well, and if there's anything we're doing that you think we need legal opinion on, right, like that's when you raise it, and that's when we get it. But if we're doing something standard boilerplate, like there's no point in
Right.
in getting the attorney involved. And I think in my mind, that's what this is changing, is instead of everything going to them and wasting everybody's time and city dollars, like mechanism to do that.
But be mindful when it says the council, again, you guys are a body. Be mindful of that. You're 3 or you're 5 individuals that make up a body. 3 of you make up a quorum. 3 of you can sense that you want the city attorney's opinion on an ordinance, for instance, that would kick it back to legal sufficiency for review. The next thing, again, your next avenue would be as an individual councilperson would be to go to the city manager. And again, he could explain the rationale of why you don't need that legal review or why it's not necessary. But, you know, if even he's sitting there pondering, hey, yeah, we should probably get this double checked, he can then make that request. Or again, even me, the mayor, you could come to me and be like, hey, I don't believe this meets legal sufficiency or any kind of, I don't think this is lawful, for instance. We could go back and look at it. But even now, you know, there's questions over certain parts of the code right now of whether certain parts of that code are lawful to begin with, and even those had legal sufficiency. So stuff does get through legal sufficiency that is also unlawful, and there's instances of that currently.
And there's also case law that changes, that sets precedent for things that may have been adopted before anyone challenged that particular idea. So
The legal sufficiency doesn't necessarily,
it doesn't, it's
Cut
not,
and
right,
dry
it's
your
it's not
ordinance.
forever necessarily,
Yeah.
right?
additional on it?
Important to have the attorney available to answer legal questions during the council meeting. Maybe not every time, but to establish this legal sufficiency. There are a lot of questions that a layperson, a council person, won't even think of regarding legal sufficiency. And it's a real benefit to have a legal mind with us to point out that this could be suspect or this could be illegal if we move forward like this. There's a lot of ethical questions like that could be brought before us. I think it's important to, before council votes on legislation, that they have a legal review or have a legal opinion, whether the council's here in person or whether he submits some kind of written statement, I guess is immaterial, but I think it's important to have that legal opinion on virtually everything we do.
Well, technically, this doesn't stop him from submitting legal opinion after you guys have adopted something. And to be blunt, you know, thinking over the past couple council meetings, you guys have adopted ordinances without the attorney here. And again, you could go back and say it's because he's going to get legal sufficiency
Well,
later, but if the idea
that's
is,
working under a handicap, though. I mean, when you have the legal piece answered, you can make a better decision.
but that's what I'm saying, you know, you guys have, I think, probably half of the meetings, maybe since the city attorney was brought back, he hasn't been at the meetings. So it can't be that important. But, you know, when
He's present at video time, I mean, you know.
well, sometimes he's present video.
Yeah, he has missed a number of meetings.
Yes, he has missed a number of meetings. And again, it isn't about the performance of that. This really comes down to, you don't need a city attorney at every meeting. There's plenty of councils that operate without a city attorney at every meeting. You're basically paying somebody to sit there on video at $250 an hour at the taxpayer's dime to maybe not even chime in on
You
an
know,
item.
there's just,
You also have the
there's
opportunity to
ethical
ask.
questions that need to be answered today that we need a legal opinion on, and we don't have
Well,
we can't
if
get
you're
that.
questioning something in the packet, you have plenty of time to review the packet before the meeting and ask the city manager or the mayor questions that they can bring up to the city attorney if they find it necessary. So I don't really see this being a problem at all.
And again, when
You have access to the lawyer, it's just through the city manager or the mayor.
and you still have access through the body. I mean, you come in on the workshop, you see something on the agenda, hey, can we get consensus to get,
You know, the mayor's filter or the city manager's filter is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for direct contact with the legal mind to make my own decisions.
if you're looking for direct contact as an
Or her
individual, even our current code doesn't allow that. It speaks to the council getting legal opinion, and the council is a body. What it really comes down to is, again, as the body, if you want legal representation at your next meeting, you request it, he comes to the next meeting. Heck, you can even say, city manager, as a person, hey, could we really get that city attorney at the next meeting over this item? He says, sure. You still have plenty of access. You have 3 different routes of access to the city attorney. The idea here is that he is not the personal attorney of council people. He is the city's attorney. And again, every hour that you use of that, every email that you send is at least a 15-minute billable period. And what is that, at least $50 for every email that you send?
But I think the backstop for that is what Rachel had said, that, say at a workshop, we decide that we need to have somebody look this over to make sure everything's right. We can have the attorney at the next meeting on that Monday and be giving his opinion on it. So we still have the backstop of having the attorney's opinions on
I
things.
guess I see a lot of instances where I would need a legal opinion before moving forward. And maybe not every time, but certainly many times, issues come up that question, either legal questions or ethical questions that need to be answered on the spot. And you know, and the myth of transparency that you project is cloaked without that legal opinion.
Again, if that was so much of a concern, we wouldn't have our current city attorney, because there's multiple instances of them not showing up to multiple meetings at this point. And again, that's fine, because realistically,
The law is the law, so whoever the attorney is will be able to render an opinion based on his knowledge, and that is why we pay for an attorney to advise us on matters, so that
What's wrong with synthesizing a list of questions that come up during a meeting or a workshop or your own review of the packets as we get them and sending them in to the city manager or the mayor or whoever? Like, I hear what you're saying, right? But I am kind of like, why does an attorney need to sit there for 2, 3, 4 hours if maybe one question comes up, maybe two? Right, like, that doesn't seem like an effective use of resources, right? Like, that's,
that's, you know, that's, I don't have much problem with the ordinance, other than the fact that there needs to be some way to reach the attorney on a direct basis and ask questions regarding a particular issue. You know, the smokescreen of saving money by not having the attorney here critical, considering all the other personnel we're adding and how we're expanding our budget leaps and bounds and cutting our rates and doing everything else to injure our financial well-being. And we
also
worry
to
about,
increase
you know,
efficiency
it's
and
kinda
effectiveness,
like,
though.
like swatting the net in order to get rid of the
That's
bear,
fair.
I guess.
and just to clarify, we haven't increased the budget other than the standard increases. I mean, there was no inflation of the budget to plan for the additional personnel. We cut in departments to make those.
We didn't add any personnel to the budget.
We have two in here, but I sat down with the city manager and made cuts to the departments to afford those personnel. There wasn't an expansion of the budget for them.
Yeah, we're not spending more money to add more capacity and human resources. That's I think the point the mayor's making.
And again, you know, that's part of why we're doing stuff like this, is to really kind of rein in some of that spending. Again, I'm trying to think during my time, you know, there's been questions of, I need a legal opinion of whether the mayor can issue a proclamation. Well, you could go to the city manager and ask that question, or you could go to me and ask that question. I mean, the mayor can issue a proclamation. But again, money was spent for that email, when it's a very simple question to get answered. And that's kind of why you have the city manager. Is if you have these questions, I mean, more than likely, there are some of them he's going to be able to answer for you. The council has the authority to fire the city manager. If you are asking him the council can, I'm bringing that up for this, though, is that the council can fire the city manager. I mean, if you bring something to him and you feel he is not he's not hearing your request, if you want to get it sent to legal, you still have authority over the city manager. I mean, there is no, you still have the ability to get legal opinion. There's 3 different methods and avenues here to do it. And it's kind of the same thing. I mean, we know we can operate a meeting without a city attorney. We've done it multiple times over the past 2 years I've been here. So it definitely isn't a requirement. And there's plenty of municipalities out there that do it without a city attorney as well. That's my closing on it. Anybody else comment?
Council needs direct access to legal opinions, that's my opinion, and that's all I'm gonna say about it. That's the whole point I wanna make.
The other comment. Shit, what'd I do? Excuse me. The voice of God. The other point that I had was under the meeting attendance, and I raised this the last week about shall attend meetings of the Planning Commission, Board of Appeals, Economic Development Commission, or any other city body were requested by the mayor, the city manager, city council, and I think that we ought to add, or the body, or consensus of the body holding the meeting. If the, you know, I think that if you've got those independent boards and commissions feel that they need that sort of legal backup, that they ought to be able to do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
problem with that?
so that was, let me get that, that was consensus of boards of, let's just say consensus of boards of council.
Yeah, or yeah.
Because they're technically all boards of council. Jim, you taking a note there
Line
on that?
34.
Yep, so that'll be D2, add also consensus of boards of council. And on C1, add
Council.
when required by the mayor, city manager, or council
Right.
for furnished writings. Okay. I am now looking for a motion to approve,
As amended?
as amended would be, yeah, as amended.
Motion.
Approve?
Look for a second.
Second.
Any further comments, questions, concerns before we head into vote? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Carries. Up next, we have Resolution 2025-11. So the last time we talked, the idea was to expand this to include workshops and public comment pertaining to the individual agenda items. When talking with staff, you know, one thing we want to make sure is that there's still decorum for the meetings. So one of the things we brought up for suggestion would be additional public comment pertaining to specific agenda items will be allowed during council workshops. Following a sign-up with the city clerk, such comments by those registered to speak will be heard following the council discussion of each agenda item. Individuals who have elected to speak will be called to the podium at the appropriate time. That is just to maintain a decorum so people aren't coming back and forth to the podium as the council meeting is being conducted. And that gives everybody a fair shot to actually talk about the agenda items. Other than that, I'm trying to think if there was, and again, this is for both the Monday and the workshop meetings, so that there is now 2 opportunities to talk about that.
So are we going to?
Or actually, council workshops is the agenda item.
Right, they can comment contemporaneously on the agenda items at the workshops if they have signed up with the,
Yep. And basically, very simple, you
Clerk.
walk in, you go to the clerk saying, hey, I want to speak on this specific item. When we get to the item, they'll flag that we have a public comment, you'll be called to the podium. Again, that's an expansion to allow people to talk on those individual items, but we also want to make sure that we're not, it's not becoming, I guess, maybe a town hall back and forth at the podium.
right, it should still be the same, we listen and not
Yeah.
necessarily respond, because it's not really the place to do that, so. The concerns ought to be heard if they have concerns over what they've heard in the discussion regarding whatever the item is, so I'm good with it.
Any, well, I'll go to, looking for a motion in regards to that.
Motion to adopt?
I'll second it.
Any additional comments, questions, concerns by council?
I with one caveat. I speaking on the monitor as I was sitting here, and as long as we follow those rules, I think it'll work. But yeah, including holding people to a time limit, as the county does. I can tell you from experience that the reason that rule was dropped, we've always had comments at all the meetings up until a point where we had a group of individuals who'd come in and monopolize the meeting. And they would literally tie the meeting in knots, and they'd prolong it forever. And we had to institute that 3-minute rule in order just to hold some semblance of order. So if we follow the rules that we've already established, I can support this.
The 3-minute rule still holds. In here it does say the presiding officer shall retain the authority to manage public comment period, including the imposition of reasonable time limits and other procedural measures when necessary to maintain decorum and fairness. My biggest thing is if we have one speaker, again, that might be a time where you can maybe let them speak past the 3 minutes. Because there's nobody else lined up to speak. Obviously, the idea here would be if we have 10 people who are all lining up to speak, yes, we'd have to implement the three-minute period and make sure people are following that. But realistically, if 2 or 3 people are showing up to talk, it's, as the current presiding officer in the mayor's seat, my opinion is let them be heard. We're not in such a time crunch that 3 people are really going to prolong a meeting more than we've already done it. But again, I'm more than willing to accommodate that as a presiding officer if we're getting more people queued in to talk and whatnot.
Yeah, I think we can apply some common sense here.
Yeah.
Like, this is,
Right.
this is,
Everybody should have
Easy
a
to-
chance to say their piece, but they need to do it respectfully and
yeah, of course, decorum matters.
No 2-hour filibusters.
That's right, none of us want to be here for that long.
Yeah.
And technically, again, as council, you guys can always also close down.
Yeah, motion to close.
Yeah, you can close it.
Yeah. And, but like I say, as long as people don't abuse the privilege, I
Yeah.
see no reason we can't do this.
And that's what, if it is becoming a problem, again, it could be readdressed as simply as going back to a resolution.
Yep.
Any additional comments, questions, concerns by council?
No, sir.
Hearing none, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Up next, we head over to the water and sewer rates. You guys should have seen an updated one because there was some language that changed in the 3rd paragraph towards the end. Basically, it just said it changed from the prior year's rate to the current rates. It's just cleaning up.
Oh, yeah, from,
It's
The
nothing.
old one said maintained, the new
Yeah,
one says
maintain.
reduced.
This one says reduce. Again, this is a 5% reduction from the previous rates. I don't remember the numbers off my head, but it was like 2, again, I don't remember the,
725 or something.
yeah, it was like
That
7,
Sounds right.
yeah. Right around there, and then the other one's like 14, 9
Double.
maybe.
Yeah, it was double. It was like
But again, it's 5% from the previous rates that we had been adopting. I'm looking for a motion in regards to it.
trying to find I don't think I have the correct one
Yep,
here.
here's the correct one.
Motion to adopt.
Oh.
So I didn't change it. I'm looking
Okay.
for a second.
Second.
Any additional comments, questions, concerns by council?
I guess I'm confused because this.
You're looking at the workshop one. So this
Oh.
is the actual water
Oh,
rates.
okay, all right. All right, I'm sorry, because I downloaded that out of the packet, so it's,
I might have a copy of what the previous one looked like,
oh, no, I got
That
it.
should be the,
or maybe
well,
I
that's
don't.
part of it, the last page, that was the part that I was going.
Again, basically, the other one just said here, instead of from the previous year's rates, it said maintain from the previous year's rates. Maintain was replaced with reduced. It was just a cleaning up of the language in there.
Sorry, I actually have a question. Since we just adopted the resolution for public comment, should we not, does that apply now?
It doesn't because the agenda was already created. And we talked about this, whether we could apply it before or after.
Got it, okay.
That'll be,
I just wanted to make
That'll
sure.
be-
it applies to the next meeting
Yeah,
going
that'll-
forward.
that'll be
I just
starting
wanted to
on
make sure,
June.
because I was like, wait a minute, if this applies now, then
Changing the
they
rules
want
in
to
the
talk
middle
about it, they
of
can
the-
talk about it.
Yeah, I mean,
The agenda will reflect it. There's a couple, like, we'll have a thing on the agenda that says right above resolution ordinances and agreements. The public comment pertaining to non-agenda items and agenda items is what it'll say there. And then right below that, it's gonna have a thing in, it's basically gonna have a little blurb that says, if you would like to discuss a particular agenda item, please see the clerk for registration. So it's gonna, all that'll be kind of stated on the agenda. Is that,
Like a
I think
footnote or
that's what we were
something like
looking at,
that.
right?
Right, for those who want to speak, after council discusses each agenda item at that point, right, there will be a sign up. Otherwise, it'll just be like we do now.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So anyway, so getting back to the matter at hand, yeah, I'm opposed to, not that I'm opposed to reducing the water and sewer rates, but I'm just concerned that, you know, right now, we can do this. What happens if next year we have to raise the rates back again? And I just think that that's going to be a tough ask, that we turn, are we going to start fluctuating the rates every year? We've held the same rates for now, what, the last 8 years?
Yeah, they reduced them in 2017.
Right. And we've been able to hold the rates, which is great. You know, and there is I guess there's a 5% surplus, which is what caused you to reduce the rates
Well-
5%. But
The surplus is bigger than 5, but the idea is the workshop is going to be the follow-up to basically say, what does administration suggest on what the water rates look like? Again, this specifically ties into the workshop as well, because the idea is when we come back in April and they have the workshop, the idea is administration is basically going to present a massive, comprehensive overview of the water system, and they're going to provide a rationale of why we're reducing, why we're increasing, or why we're maintaining rates. And the idea is to basically try to conjure up as much public involvement as we can. Again, we're going to really advertise as best we can, try to get people out, and we want to educate them no matter which way the rates end up going next year. But I think, you know, just to give one example, when I look at some of the other cities, when I go to MML and whatnot, you know, some of the ARPA funding that was used there were towards civil projects and things of that nature. You know, we used our ARPA money towards infrastructure here in Tawnytown. And I guess the question is, you know, where's the bang for the residents' buck of what happened there? And again, we have future projects coming up, you know, same thing. We have money set aside for them. I currently feel we're in a position to make a 5% cut. And I believe the workshop, you know, whichever way it goes, that'll be the time for staff to really explain the rationale behind maintaining, reducing, or increasing rates. And again, I know, for instance, Councilmember Kalanock has asked the city manager for a more comprehensive financial plan as to what those look like. And that's kind of the direction we're going in. We want to see a little bit more of the numbers than we're seeing just out of the budget before we make the next recommendation.
Yeah, I've asked the city staff to actually produce like actual financial analysis as opposed to like an accounting framework, because you know, financial analysis basically does projections over the long haul. So like we can do optimal pricing strategies with that kind of framework. And there's a couple of models that I know of that you can use. So I'm kind of putting the onus on city staff to actually be able to justify how we price, and if we need to raise.
I just don't want to do it prematurely, you know, that you're asking for the study on the new model.
Yep.
You know, and modeling the rates out in advance. I'm just a little concerned because I noticed that we do have declining usage numbers, and we've had declining usage numbers. And so I'm concerned if we're lowering rates and we get a continuing decline in usage number, are we cutting our own throats?
Valid concern.
The other thing is, you know, what I'd like to see done with surplus is if we have a surplus, you know, in that enterprise fund of the water and sewer rates, specifically funding the water and sewer operations, that we perhaps set aside some of that money to try to figure out a way that we can monitor people's water usage such that if you see a sudden spike, we can let somebody know, hey, you might have a leak, so they don't wait 3 months
Oh,
down the
yeah,
line.
I've seen those
Right,
complaints online a
right,
lot.
and
Yeah,
that's,
that-
and
that's-
and
that's
it's happened
bad,
to
yeah,
us, so I know that it happens. You know, have that money used for that, or have money maybe set aside that where we can help somebody who suddenly has $1,000 water bill, and one, can't pay it, and two, obviously, if they've been $300 a quarter for umpty-ump years, and suddenly they've got $1,000 water bill, something's happened here, and we should probably see what we can do to help them out.
And I
because-
think that's part, in part of our resolution for like the 6-month plan is to include a water relief fund or start figuring out a framework to build a water relief fund to help people in those kind of instances. Because it's a thing, and that's a problem, right? Like if you're used to getting a $200-300 water bill or whatever it is, and then all of a sudden now it's a $1,500 water bill, are you gonna have the cash on hand to be able to do that? Probably not. Like most people will not, and I don't think that's a valid ask, but it does still unfortunately have to get paid by someone, right? And I think that's kind of a use case for the water relief fund that we've proposed in the resolution last meeting.
And I know, again, Westminster City, for instance, they have their new water meters that you can actually monitor online and whatnot.
And, yeah, the city manager and I have had a discussion about that.
So here would be my thing is, Jim, how much do we have in the utility fund currently?
I don't have that in front of me.
I mean, it's a
It
pretty.
was
it's a-
7.6
yeah,
mil as
so
of last
you
meeting.
have the money to do it if you wanted to, but it just depends on what your priorities are.
Well,
So-
that's an operational thing for the operational enterprise, then that should be funded out of that fund, to me. We shouldn't be,
Or categorized as a separate fund itself, like you could do, I don't know, some kind of separate fund for it, and it's managed completely
But
independently.
I'm just saying, that's where this has all been going to begin with. And again, this cut is 169,000. You have 7.6 mil in that fund.
And
we
we're,
don't want to
and
be
we're
jumping into
still,
that.
and we're
And
still,
we're
but we have,
still-
and we're still putting into it
Still
with
putting
this
into
budget.
it With this budget, yeah.
call it we're using money out of the,
So so when they do the budget, for instance, the revenues match the expenditures.
yes.
But
The revenues have exceeded the expenditures, but
They
again,
exceed.
you're 5%, you're talking $160,000. You know, the 7.5 million or whatever is there as, that's the structural fund to,
It's liquidity, yeah.
right, this liquidity that keeps us operating. We have debt service that comes out of that, we have capital projects that come out of that. So, you know, that's like a whole different volume, because that fund wasn't built on excesses from water and sewer rates. That fund was built on the
Back fees.
impact fees.
Is that true?
It's a combination.
it's a combination of the two. And when was the last time we saw impact fees, I guess?
Crossing?
Meads Crossing and Meadowbrook.
How many years?
So 3 years, 4 years, maybe.
So again, it's gone up
3
steadily
years.
to 7.6 mil now.
Well, some of that is because we're getting interest on, or return on investment with that fund, right?
Yeah. And
Well, the interest is included in the budget.
So last month, I had some numbers in front of me that I shared as far as, you know, what the revenues, what the surplus was, you know, over the past several years. And I tried to contrast that with the projects that are in the draft capital improvement program, which we will get before you in the next week or two, so that you'll have time to review it before June. So there is typically a surplus at the end of every year above the day-to-day operating expenses. And we save that up to be able to do the more expensive maintenance projects for the aging infrastructure. So just, you know.
That's how the two funds are made, is that kickback and then the impact fees. But again, we haven't seen impact fees in years. So the steady increase has actually been the kickback from the surplus of the budget.
And impact fees are really to repay us for the expense that we had to develop the capacity for the growth. So really two separate things. The impact fees or benefit assessments are kind of us recovering our investment to build the capacity, but then the surplus from the user rates is put aside for maintenance projects that don't necessarily increase capacity. For example, our ongoing Westview Drive water line. That is just, you know, an aged water line that breaks regularly. and we lose a lot of water when we have a water main break, so it needs to be replaced. That's maintenance of the system, that's preservation of the system, and that's what that surplus money above and beyond the, day-to-day operating expenses gets set aside for, so that we can pay for these big maintenance projects. So, and again, we still, with the 5%, we do, we should still have some surplus at the end of the year, probably just less than we've been seeing. And that just means it'll take longer, if this continues, it'll just take longer to save up money for the projects. So, but again, it's not going to break us in a year. So we see what happens.
I just think rather than get on a roller coaster of raises and lowers, I'd like to see the results of Nick was talking about first, I think, before we make adjustments to the rates.
Fair.
Here would be my thing, is we know we can afford the 5% rates. Jim, all of our ARPA went to infrastructure, right?
Correct.
So we caught up on infrastructure over the years. And again, my question keeps coming back to what was the benefit for the residents here? And for me, that's starting to look at rate reductions. And again, if the workshop provides something else, we can take a look at that. But my recommendation from the mayor's office at least would be the rate reduction for now, and to take a look later. When the workshop happens, that'll be the time for staff to really make that argument one way or the other. And again, my hope is to really involve the public so they can be informed of why that decision was made. But if we have the availability to provide relief for people who are currently struggling, and this is their tax dollars at the end of the day, well, technically water bills, why shouldn't we? And if the idea is the 169 is eventually going to somehow bankrupt a $7.6 million fund, that's just not true. Unless we're all sitting here for the next couple decades.
Not really what I was saying, but.
No, I was referencing some other comments
Yeah.
that I've seen.
Yeah.
But a 5% reduction is somehow not going to bankrupt the city.
And the other thing to remember is that you're talking about $5 a month
Yeah, for the average bill.
per user on the average bill.
And the other thing is it's kind of the same thing, not to veer off, but, there's been talks about the budget. Well, the budget, there was no increase to fund the positions. You can't bankrupt a city with a balanced budget. It's kind of the same thing here with the water. It's balanced in the budget currently. And we know we can afford it and still have a surplus at the end of the year for it. So why not provide the relief?
Right. I will respond to one thing that you said as far as like where's the benefit for the people from the ARPA money. The benefit is by investing it in the system, we didn't have to go out and borrow money to do those projects. We're also in compliance at our wastewater treatment plant for the first time the last couple of years since like 2006. So,
But I guess if that project
so
that
how
you're,
it benefits the people is that's proper management of the resources of the system. And by doing that, we didn't have to go borrow money to repair aged sewer lines and replace terracotta lines. We used the money from the federal government to do that so that we could keep rates low. That's how it benefits the people. We invested that money in our system so that it's more effective and efficient, and that it allows us to maintain the rates where the world around us is increasing.
but I guess my issue would be is you had that money to begin with. You didn't need the ARPA to do that project. So, I mean, why wouldn't you have
Well-
done, if the project was what brought you into compliance, why wouldn't you have done it before when you had the money to begin with?
It accelerated things.
I did. And again, that's what I'm saying is that we're definitely at an acceleration point where we can afford a 5% reduction.
Have like a heat map or a matrix of all the water infrastructure and like its estimated age and like, I know we talked about it a little bit in email when I asked about, was it a copper, something up, I don't remember what it was offhand, but like do we keep records like that anywhere to know how old things are and when they might be ending their life cycle?
Yes, we've been trying to build an inventory of the system. So we've done a lot of televising, and we've tried to identify all of the terracotta pipe around the city. We've done manhole inventories where we note the materials of the manholes and the condition of them, as well as if we're able to, the pipes visible from either side of each manhole so that we know what we're looking at. And we've tried to geolocate them as well, having some learning curve issues with that.
Sure.
That's new technology for us. So we're in the process of building that and have been for the last couple of years. So, but the
Do you have
the
any idea when
televising
that
of
project will be complete, and you'll, like, do you have a time frame for that?
So the televising was completed a couple of years ago, and that informed the capital improvement program
Okay.
as far as like what areas we needed to target
Yeah.
for sewer rehabilitation. So that'll be that's in the capital improvement program. So that televising and inspection guided us as to what we needed to replace, what were the most urgent projects. And we based it on the condition of the lines as well as the location. So if there's a crumbling terracotta line that's also next to a stream, that got the priority because that's more prone to inflow and infiltration, being so close to a water source, things like that, or one at the bottom of the hill, something like that. So we've kind of hit the low-hanging fruit with a lot of those projects on the sewer rehab, and we've seen flows reduced at the wastewater treatment plant substantially as a result. So we've really recovered a lot of capacity that we were losing to inflow and infiltration, which also, the more that we flow through the plant, the more the pumps have to run, the more electricity we use, the more chemicals we use, and so on. So doing those projects has helped us, even though chemicals are more expensive and things like that, and electricity goes up, we've managed to maintain the rates by becoming more efficient through these projects. So we have, they are to a degree data-driven because we did the research, we did the inspections. We do have mapping of the lines. Some of it's very outdated or, not exactly accurate. It might not be depicted on the right side of the street or something like that. But we're always trying to refine it. And, when DPW has time that a crew can go out and, and do these inspections, they do them. So we're building it, ongoing, but the geolocating would be very helpful.
Yeah, that was my
And,
question. Have we gotten to the point where we're putting that on GIS mapping?
We've been trying, but we're having some challenges with that. We've used, cell phone data, and we have purchased some equipment that we're still honestly figuring out how to get everything calibrated. And when we compare that to the cell phone data, it's just been a challenge. And it's something that is, kind of done in people's spare time. And there's not a whole lot of that, so.
So because it's done in spare time,
Right.
I assume you don't have like a,
Not
rough
a
date.
hard schedule, no.
okay.
No.
I know when the mayor and I took a visit of the DPW facilities, I believe it was Kevin, because Randy and Kevin went with us. Kevin threw out a number of what percentage of the terracotta pipes still exist. So if you'd reach out.
I plan on,
Throw you that.
I plan on chatting with him as soon as possible.
He
hoping
has
in
a
the
lot
next,
of
like, weekend or
information,
two.
so. They also stated they had around 7% water loss a year, which obviously the new infrastructure is working because 7% is super impressive. Because about the average is about 11 to 12, so that's pretty impressive.
Average, yeah.
And then before streetscape, they mentioned that it was around 20, 21, so that's
Yeah.
huge.
Well,
Huge upgrade.
Streetscape replaced all of the oldest lines
Yep.
in the city, and that was, that took care of a lot of it right there. So, yeah, getting that number down under 10% is a very positive thing.
Yeah, 7% is really good, so.
I do think for kind of long-term planning, though, so having that project actually, instead of on people's spare time or whatever, kind of making it a priority would probably be good for long-term planning, so we can understand roughly when we expect a lot of this infrastructure to start falling apart and needing to be replaced, right? Because like that's one of the ways that we're gonna,
Are we
that's one of the
able-
inputs that we're gonna
yeah.
need for the analysis that I'm asking with this water stuff, because it's an enterprise system, it's all supposed to pay for itself in theory, so without having that kind of data, it's hard to make those projections. It can still kind of be done with, you know, some assumptions, but it would be a lot better if we had that kind of data, and it was.
Well, if I might make a suggestion, Councilman, how about we take the $160,000 and use it for that, right?
Yeah.
You know, you just presented a good case for something that needs to be done with money that we don't have and people that we don't have available. Well, you know,
Well, again, you
do
have
have
the
the
money.
money.
That's the issue. That's the issue you keep
We-
running into is you
we
have
it
the
in
money.
the utility fund, right? So,
again,
like, if we
well,
really need to do
right,
it, we
but
can do it from there.
again,
But
I mean, it should-
I do get your
out of
point.
the
I see
it
what
should
you're
be out of
saying.
the
You've got the
Well,
160,
that's
180K here, like, let's get a contractor to come do, I understand what you're saying, though.
The other thing would be, again, you're what, $4+ million ahead of schedule. So, again, maybe the plan was to raise rates over the next couple of years if you didn't get the ARPA money, I don't know. But you're $4 million ahead of schedule, right? Because you had the ARPA money, as far as where your capital projects were and whatnot. Again, whether you borrowed money or not to do them. But again, I don't see an issue of this breaking the city's back as far as doing a 5% relief. Again, I would almost advocate higher at this point. But again, I think it's good to go ahead and do, and the idea would be to readdress it at the workshop that is on the agenda for the water and sewer rates ordinance 17-2025. And it's kind of the same thing. Maybe you can accelerate that mapping to where we have that for that April meeting.
We have looked at software and things like that that will do, use AI to do predictive, failures and things like that for the infrastructure. Of course, we didn't have the money in the budget to be able to move forward with that. Just like, again, we can, if you prioritize one thing, you're deprioritizing something else. And day-to-day operations do not leave a tremendous amount of discretionary time for projects. So, we need to keep that in mind, that there's only so many hours in a day, and
You guys
above
are
and
already over
beyond
capacity as it
the
is,
day-to-day,
like, yeah.
work orders is, hit or miss. So we always have the option of hiring a consultant to go out and do inspections and gather the data for us. We always have the option of, engaging a firm that can do, a very in-depth analysis of the rates, as we've done in the past. We have those options. To do it in-house typically is going to take longer, and, you may not have that specific expertise, for everything. So that's going to be up for council to really decide how we want to approach those things.
And another option is to go to a contractor and have them pass along like the frameworks or models, teach you guys how to use it, and then you can just maintain the models moving forward too, right? Like there's a couple of different options, I think.
So
here.
and that's something that we are actually in conversation with our consultant engineer about as well, with both the water and sewer system, that we haven't really done that analysis for quite a few years, and it's due again. So we don't have a proposal at this point, but it's been kicked around a bit, so.
Thank you.
And it's not in the budget this year either, so.
Additional comments, questions, concerns before I head to vote? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Nay. Up next, we have the police manual. There was let me pull it up real quick. There was one suggested change we have in the police manual, which was in paragraph 2, where it says the city manager, city council, and the mayor shall be informed of substantial policy updates. The suggested change would be the city manager, city council, and the mayor shall be informed in writing of any policy updates at least quarterly. I am looking for a motion and looking for a motion to approve as amended.
Motion to approve as amended.
Second.
Additional comments, questions, concerns by council?
I had a lot of concerns with this one. I think we're, again, the myth of transparency, this ordinance puts a big sheet over what's going on with the police manual. Given our recent track record with police chiefs, not the present company accepted, of course, I think it would be a big mistake to allow full autonomy of the police manual to rest with the police chief. I don't have any problem with the police chief making recommendations and coming to council with those recommendations and saying, this is what we need to do to update our police manual, and let the council bless it. That way, the whole community knows what's going on. Well, the way this ordinance is written, the changes can be made, and the chief just informs council, this is what I've done. This could have a huge impact across the board as far as operations go, not only for the police department, but for the budget, for the overall budget as well. I think we need to, I don't have any problem with the chief driving or rowing the boat as far as changing the police manual, updating the police manual, and making it more effective. But I have a real problem with him being able to do it with autonomy. I think it needs to come before council, and we should vote on it before it becomes effective.
Just to, sorry, I want to circle back on one thing. Just to be clear, the city council, I think it was 2024 maybe it was 2025, it's 2024 actually, adopted the contract for Lexipol, which manages our police department, like policy and whatnot. The biggest idea here would be, Jim, how long have we been waiting for a police manual? Is it waiting legal review? Is that what we're waiting on?
Now, with all due respect, the police chief is not an elected official. We are. We have a responsibility to the citizens to let them know what's going on
Well-
in every aspect of city government, not only the municipal functions that's involved with City Hall and the annex and the public works and all the rest, but in the entire operations of the city, which includes the police department, which are subject to the city manager's authority.
So just to check, again, we have Lexipol, which manages that policy. It's been, I think we're waiting a year now for a legal review on the manual of the policy updates from Lexipol. So it's been waiting for a legal review to come to council, so we've been
Well,
sitting.
again, I don't have any problem with the chief coming to us with recommendations and we acting on them. But I don't think they should just be implemented across the board without any official approval from city government, which is us. I think we have a responsibility to the citizens to be able to answer the questions about what's going on at the police department. And when we can say the police chief came to us and explained his position and we supported it, we have a lot more to go on than, well, we didn't know about that until it happened.
Well, again, you're going to be getting updates quarterly on any policy changes. In addition to that, council still remains oversight through their charter and vested powers.
I mean, but
And the next thing,
that's very vague, and there's no teeth in that. There needs to be a vote of approval on any major change in the manual.
the teeth is that per your charter sanctioned authority, you still have oversight of the police department. You could come in the next day, revoke the manual if you wanted to. You could technically still add stuff to the manual. You actually don't even need that spelled out in code.
How are we
because-
made aware of these changes?
Quarterly in writing.
Because quarterly in writing per the code. That's the change that we're making here, is that it's going to be provided to council of any policy updates in writing quarterly. That was that addition we made at the beginning. And then, again, it is the police manual, per state law, if I'm remembering correctly, has to be made available online. So you can actually go and look at it as a resident. You don't have, council doesn't have to try to explain it to you or say what's in it. You can actually go see it. And, I don't know why council that doesn't consist of police officers would be in the midst of actually a proven policy for police. Again, this is part of the issue we've had for the last couple of years, and it's part of the reason why our police department was so hamstringed, was just that constant involvement by council in the police department. And we're finally kind of getting away from that. And again, we've had policy updates that have been sitting in the queue for close to a year now, because they've been waiting legal review to be brought from council. This basically expedites those. You're gonna see them at the next quarter. And again, it says at least quarterly. The chief could adopt them and then write you the next day on them. But the idea is you will still have oversight, and if you really wanna check day to day, I mean, you can go into that manual and check. The police department's right down the road as well. You have access to the police chief, you have access to the city manager.
Well,
Effectively
and
involved in
Lexipol is
approving
like a
any
nationally
policy that's
recognized
set
thing.
before the committee.
Where is our expertise on being able to rule on the efficacy of the different policies?
We have that responsibility to approve policy and to change policy, and we're the only ones that can do that.
But where is our expertise that allows us to be able to do that? Why won't we why shouldn't we let?
Based on the input and recommendations from the police department.
And just so you're aware, that's not true either. There's a thing called administrative policy that is separate from legislative policy. You can still have administrative policy, and that's basically what this police manual is kicking back to. It's becoming an administrative
Yeah,
policy manual, essentially.
I think,
But like one of the whole points of
I think
Lexipol
we're
though is
asking
like
for a lot
it
of-
tries to make sure it's aligned with like current law and best practices in policing. I mean, it deals with like legal exposures and complaints. I mean, it's a whole manual. I mean, if we really have questions about it, we've got the man himself over there. He can come up and talk about it.
I have
mean, he can do it way better than I can, but I mean,
no
this is.
question about the ethics of our police chief. That's
No,
not
it's
even
not about
entering into
ethics.
this conversation.
The
What my
conversation is
conversation is
you're
about
not
is
sure
that
about adopting the
We have a
manual though.
responsibility to approve policy and in a transparent way so that everybody's aware of it before it's a policy.
Which is why, like, all of the Lexipol manuals are available online, right? Like, so literally, me or you, we can go, we can look at it, if we have problems, like, we can search it, and as council people, we can bring it up and be like, and question it or do whatever we need to do. Like, this is as transparent as I think you can make it without like literally sending it to everybody's doorstep, right? Like,
Well,
I don't see transparency as an issue on this one.
I mean, that's the next thing. No offense to, the question would be
the
how
mayor
many.
talks about transparency, but this is cloak and dagger.
It isn't. I mean,
But if it's available
realistically,
to everyone
it's
online, how is that cloak and dagger? Like, that doesn't make sense.
the policy is
right?
available
Like-
to everybody online, and not only that, again, we have this is a pretty good audience for the council chambers. We got 4 people in the audience. This is, again, higher than the average. And then I don't know how many people are watching online. I don't know.
The mayor's mouth,
Oh! Sorry. The podium's hiding Alex, so. But, again, my bad, 5 people
need to
show.
grow, buddy.
Actually, we are greatly exceeding the average right now. And again, I don't know how many viewers we have online, but realistically, you're talking about the policy having to come before you, so 5, 10, 15, maybe 15 people can see that it happened at this meeting when everybody has access to it online to go to the police manual. And again, this is managed by Lexipol per a contract that that council did in 2024. It just has been caught up in the other things that have been caught up through the pipeline of items.
This is making sure that
Yeah,
we're
this is-
ultimately modernizing our police force, and again, I think it's making it as transparent as you possibly can without like beating somebody over the head with a manual, right?
Just as a question, is the current manual available online?
Chief, is the current manual available online?
Where? Just so that everybody would know. I've never looked for it, so I don't know, but
So go to the city
I was gonna say,
website in the
yeah.
police department, and it's one of the drop downs or icons within that area. Yes, and that's where the Lexipol thing would be too, I assume, right?
The Lexipol will be the policy.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
and it'll be there, like it'll be the document, right?
Any additional
But it-
comments,
that-
questions,
Yeah,
concerns?
that's just as transparent as literally anything else that's on the website. I don't, again, I don't know how you can make that any more transparent.
Any additional comments, questions, concerns by council before I head to vote?
No, sir.
Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Hey,
Carries. Next up, we have ordinance 11-2025, executive administrative assistant. I don't think we had any comments for changes, right, Jim?
No.
Oh, there was one. I think the previous one still had the chief of police in it. The current one does not.
Right, we took that out.
So that, again, that was technically out. We just forgot to send the updated one. So I'm looking for a motion to adopt on this.
Motion to adopt?
Looking for a second.
Second.
Any additional comments, questions, concerns by council?
again, in addition to the bureaucracy and the red tape involved with people navigating city government, I don't think it's necessary, and just adding another layer to the overall system of things that's already overlayered.
Quite
I don't
the-
know how-
I was like, quite to the
Well,
contrary.
recommend we-
I think that the
This
city
has nothing to
manager
do with
is
red
so
tape.
overburdened with what he has to do.
He's doing
see this
3 or
as a
4 jobs.
Positive step that I've recommended for years.
And just to clarify, this isn't like a new executive position or anything like that. It's an administrative assistant that is a supplemental officer of the city. The whole idea behind this employee is basically to supplement our departments. It doesn't add an additional layer of bureaucracy. It just allows us to process things faster. And it allows, like, let's say Parks and Rec needs help because they're going through an extensive grant process and they could really use that help. That's where this employee could basically fit in and help in that regard. The other idea is, again, to make sure if we ever get in a situation where we're down multiple department heads, this person could interimly fill that role while we're doing the search. Because again, we can't keep operating like this with the city managers assuming multiple roles at a time. Things have to keep flowing, things have to keep functioning. So this is mainly a safeguard to make sure that things do keep flowing in the event of a crisis or the event of a.
Even
he-
prior to there being, that level of crisis.
Yeah, we still had.
I've seen the city manager in operation, and he does a great job, but I have long thought he's been overwhelmed. I think the position.
Yeah, there's only so long you can be over capacity for.
You're good?
Okay. Additional comments, questions, concerns by council? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Up next, we have establishment of information technology officer and agency designation. There was one change between now and the last one. We took out D because it's redundant. 34-9, there was some rewriting of the language there to make it flow a little bit better.
Sorry, could you repeat that? You took out, oh, D, I see it here.
D is.
Yeah, D is redundant, so it's crossed out. 34-9, there was some change of I think the first two sentences have been changed to make it flow a little bit better word-wise. But other than that, it remains the same as it was introduced.
I just,
Let me get to a
okay,
motion
go
real
ahead.
quick. Looking for a motion for adoption.
Motion to adopt?
Looking for a second.
Second.
Comments, questions, concerns by council?
Not my turn. No, the only thing I have, it's in the wording of the 34-9. Each appointed position listed herein shall be an officer of the city unless otherwise specified by charter, and shall be considered an agency head for the city for their respective office. What happens when we use a corporation? For example, the city engineer is not an individual person.
They're still an appointed position.
The
though.
auditor is not an individual person. Those aren't individual heads, or you know what I mean? I'm not sure that the language as used here applies because of that. You've
It
got
does, because
corporate-
what it's specifically speaking to actually is the appointed position. So each appointed position, which even if
But
you.
you're appointing a corporation and not an individual, and.
But they're still being appointed to the office. So even when you appoint the firm, for instance, the firm is technically the appointed city attorney. When you appoint a firm for engineer, it's kind of the same thing. You are appointing that firm to the position. That's why those positions have appointments. So again, this is actually correct in the idea of it saying each appointed position, and then shall be an officer, because technically they are an officer holder, whether it's an individual person or whether it's the firm, they are holding an office for the city.
But I'm not sure that follows that a corporation.
Shall be considered an
is-
agency head?
Shall be, yes. that
Yeah,
would be
so
considered an
how that follows is think of it like this, the agency that has got the appointment for the contract or whatever, they technically still say who we're dealing with essentially. You know, I know there's multiple people with a city engineer, their firm, there's multiple people who brought in an attorney firm, there's gonna be multiple people there that we're gonna be dealing with. So it isn't necessarily one specific individual at any given time, but you have appointed them to that position is the office holder of the city, which is basically what that whole section's flowing off of. And then next, that office, that appointed position shall be considered an agency head of the city for their respective office. And in that regard, if you look through our code and you look through our charter, there's specific positions where the removal authority was never put in there. One of those was actually the police chief. They added it later and said the council, but that technically doesn't work because of a charter rule. But essentially, the reason, if you're just basing it off of when they put it in, the reason would be because those are meant to be considered agencies. If you look elsewhere where it says the city council has a removal authority, it is spelt out there. But there are multiple instances in the city code where the actual removal authority isn't spelt out. And that either defaults to the appointing official, which would be the mayor, because the mayor does appointments, or that would go because they're an agency. If I were to think of the city attorney, for instance, that is an agent of the city. You know, the agency of the city then would be that a firm as well, who's representing the city. Because if you're acting on behalf of the city, if you're doing those, if you're providing the legal advice, if you're going to the court cases, if you're doing all that, you are an agent of the city, whether you like it or not.
Well, no, I'm not questioning the fact that that's an agency of the city. I'm just concerned with the,
Well, I think,
considered an agency head of the city for their respective office, and that to me consigns an individual and not a firm, but
well, it's kind of the same thing. So I appoint, for instance, I appoint the city engineer. City engineer would almost imply it's a person, right? But actually, when you go into language, it says a firm to act as the city engineer. if I
For
remember
practical purposes, though, like, what's the objection? I'm trying, because, like, even if we use a firm, like, who would object to us using a firm, and how do you foresee that creating a problem in this ordinance? That's what I'm trying to understand.
it's one of those things that just is not striking me right. And perhaps functionally, I'm just barking up a tree here, but it just doesn't read right to me, and that's, I don't know, in the back of my mind or something not quite right, and I really can't, I'm having trouble finding that, but,
I mean, is this not something we could just kind of take a common sense approach, and if it becomes a problem, we amend?
this part, I mean, that's,
Yeah, I mean, like, if the corporation things end up being a problem, then we just amend it to make it jive with how it needs to jive, but.
Well,
like,
and
like, for
truth-
common sense and practical purposes,
It's-
like, I don't
it's not-
see
again,
how this
it's-
would be a problem.
it's not going to, because if you look in that officers and employees section, you know, multiples of those actually say you're appointing a firm for this, but it is still the appointment of somebody to a city office.
And operationally, like, for example, with the auditor or the engineer, it has not been an issue.
Right.
I'm just,
That was about to be my next question. 'cause,
right,
like, I
I'm
know you
just-
guys have used firms for other
just-
things. and
I'm not
like, that's not
sure
an issue.
about codifying it in the language, but I can't really see how I can come up with something better, so.
Well, and if it, like I said, if it's a problem and, like, we need to revisit it, then we figure out the language later, but, I mean,
Like I said, I don't object to what we're doing there,
Yeah.
like I said, there's something in the
yeah,
language.
something
that's striking
in
me right
jive, right, yeah, I got you.
Additional comments, questions, concerns by council? Hearing none, I'm going to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It passes. Up next, we have the temporary administrative suspension. So there's been a list of changes in this, so I'm going to go over them real quick. The period shall not exceed, it used to be 6 days, it's been brought down to 40. It used to be 7 days for notification. It's been brought down to as soon as possible, but no later than 3 calendar days. Shall provide written notice to the city manager and city council. Next, we have,
Can't be suspended again within the same
yep, it
calendar
can't be
year.
suspended again in the same calendar year, added to the council agenda. And then we've added section F, which actually goes and further explains what this applies to, and this should take care of some of the concerns of, ethics or things that technically aren't administrative purview. You couldn't have done that to begin with, but this further explains it, that this only falls to items that are under the administrative implementation scope of the mayor and city manager, which again is something we still have discretion on to begin with, because enforcement of code falls to the executive and the administration. But basically, all this does is further explain and dialogue that this isn't meant to apply to boards, commissions, or anywhere else where somebody else has the authority to enforce this or enforce that. So again, we've added the safeguards and rails that I think really address a lot of the concerns that were raised at the last meeting in regards to it. And with that, I'll look for a motion of adoption.
Motion to adopt.
Looking for a second.
Second.
Additional comments, questions, concerns by council?
This is, I'm still not pleased at all with this. I just think that this is an opportunity to ask for trouble.
So this is just, this isn't granting the mayor a new power, right? This is formalizing an existing power because the executive
And
has.
that's really the main problem.
I don't know that's.
It
Well, it's
also,
not-
it
it's not
creates
even-
reporting
yeah, it's not even
requirements in it too.
formalizing.
So like if they're shadow suspending or not enforcing, like per this, they're supposed to let us know immediately and it's supposed to come on our docket. Like that, to me, I think that's one of the big benefits here, right? Like if any mayor is shadow not enforcing something, like we need to be informed of it and that's what this kind of codifies.
Because just to be
And-
clear, administration cannot enforce code that isn't legal or doesn't make sense, that there is code in there that is not legal. The idea,
That provision exists in state law to start with.
Yeah,
That just
but the-
simply overrides council's action. That's what that does.
no, this doesn't, because again, we can, to be frank with you, the administration can already be like, hey, there's no way for us to reasonably enforce this, just don't enforce it. And you guys don't have any notification, we just don't do it.
And this also spells out that he can't touch
Yeah.
important things like he can't say, oh, I don't like that thing in the ethics code about taking gifts. I'm going to suspend this so I can take $1 million from some developer somewhere and, not have to report it anymore because, it's been under suspension for this play. Like this says you can't touch that because that's not an administrative, administrative enforcement action, right? So like I know I fought hard for this one because like after the last meeting, I did think you guys brought up some good points and I was like, hey, I think we need to add some guardrails here. And I think they did a pretty good job of adding a lot of the guardrails that really hit, I think, the objections you guys were trying to articulate. He can't suspend habeas corpus, for example. That's not.
Darn
Fortunately,
council.
that's not in the power of the mayor. But like it also means that he can't just like wipe out boards or say I don't like that whatever.
Right, because
Like,
the concern obviously is things like, well, I'm just going to suspend the campaign finance laws.
which you cannot because
Which
that's
you
not
can't,
an
because
that's
it's
not an
administrative.
because it's the
And
mayor.
so
That's
I
right.
do
But
appreciate,
that could be done.
Sorry?
well, but that's in,
Well, that's why we.
that's
if
the
you-
guardrail.
Yeah, if you
that's-
look
that
at
paragraph
F,
F
Yeah,
is intended.
I fought hard for that,
Now,
guys.
Of all the bad legislation we've passed tonight, this is the worst.
I'm sorry we're
I
writing so
would-
much bad legislation, Jim. I apologize.
I am, this is, and
We'll
this
try and do
is,
better.
this is a particular matter that I would want legal sufficiency from an attorney on.
I'm okay with that. Yeah, and I would get behind you guys on asking for legal sufficiency on this one. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, so, you know, I would.
I do think it's legally sufficient.
My
but-
one request would be legal sufficiency from the next city attorney. That'd be my only request.
I'm okay with that.
Then how about we table this until we have a new city attorney?
Or approve based on once it's had legal sufficiency signed off by the next city attorney. So again, this won't even go into effect until it has legal sufficiency.
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Love compromise. Well, again, I think we did a really good job compromising on that F. I mean,
Well, I appreciate that you've done that, that you did that work to, you know, try to put those guardrails in it. I just want to make sure that the guardrails
I
are
fought
strong
all
enough.
weekend for it. You
And
can
again,
ask him. I sent him so many
isn't-
emails. I sent him emails. I was like, hey.
it was never meant to be something that, like how we talked about at the last meeting. Again, it's
Yeah.
mainly meant to kick stuff to your agenda.
And it's
I-
not, and it isn't about current intent.
Yeah.
It's what the next guy might do with it.
Right, no,
And that's,
and I
that's,
think
you know,
that's fair.
you got to be
No, it is, it's
legislating with
fair.
that in mind.
Yeah,
And again,
that's
I
totally
do,
valid, yeah.
I do think we've really added those guardrails in here. Again, that F really clarifies it, can't go beyond that.
Yeah, I mean,
Can I get a motion of adoption pending legal sufficiency by the next appointed city attorney? Or
That.
you could just say I so move or something.
I so move.
Looking for a second.
I'll second him.
Additional comments, questions, concerns by council? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, nay.
Hey,
Good. Up next, we got police protection standards. Trying to think if so we took out the redundant line in D, and we kept it how it is for the 2 patrol officers per 1,000 residents. And again, that the chief can make the exemption if he believes we're adequately covered. So again, the only thing that changed between the introduction and now is the removal of that first sentence in D, which was, I think, what was requested at the last meeting. Looking for a motion of adoption.
Motion to adopt.
Looking for a second.
Second.
Additional comments, questions, concerns by council?
how does this improve or enhance the current public facilities, adequate public facilities ordinance we have now?
So my explanation.
Why is it necessary, I guess, is what I'm asking.
My explanation of this would be that the previous one included the major, it included the chief, it included the lieutenant. I don't think you would include those in inadequate facilities because those aren't people who are going to be actively on patrol. When you're talking adequate facilities for a new development or something like that, you're making sure you have boots on the ground, you're able to keep up with traffic, your speed enforcement, everything else going on in the area. So again, this is basically just clarifying that it didn't mean whoever's in the police department, that's not the number. It's going off of the actual patrol level officers, which in my mind is everybody lieutenant and below. While the lieutenant does hit the streets every once in a while, he still mainly is administrative in his role.
Yeah, and I have no
Don't-
issue.
I was gonna say, you don't want spreadsheet monkeys like me being counted as, a patrol officer, right? Like that's the point of this. Boots on the ground is really what we
Right.
want to be
And
counted.
I don't have any real problem, it's just that we are, this then, we're actually, encouraging and codifying, an increase to the police department. The question is, can we afford that? And that's the only thing that jumps to me is that, so we're now, if you are taking those officers out of the administrative staff officers out of the equation, then that leaves us, are we now 3 officers short? And how do we hire 3 more officers and how do we pay for that?
Well, I think the next question would be whether the intent, I doubt somebody made this with the intent that administrative officers were meant to be counted in adequate
Oh,
facilities.
I'm not disagreeing, I'm just saying, it just, as we codify doing this,
Yeah.
then we tie ourselves to coming up with the money to pay for 3 more police officers.
If I remember correctly, we already had one in the current.
We already have
We have
one,
one,
right,
so
we
we're
have
down to
one,
2.
but my understanding is that he was being tied to the drug task force, so.
So one officer is going to drug task force,
Right.
yes.
So is that, so is that drug task force officer then included in the
Technically, it's
AFPO?
technically it's patrol equivalent police officer. I mean, technically the exclusion.
I mean, I think it's
The
technical.
exclusion here is gonna be back here where it
Right.
says, this shall exclude command or administrative positions such as chief, major, lieutenant.
Right, like I said, my concern is that it ties us to, you know, if somebody, God forbid, somebody gets shot somewhere, or there, you know, oh, there weren't enough police on duty because we didn't fully staff the police force to what we said we were going to,
Well, it's kind of the same
and
when
then we
you,
get sued for that.
it's kind of the same when you think about it now, Jim, right? We're one, well, now that we've added one to the budget, I guess we're up to par with the 8,500, because before we were still technically out of this, because we're at 8,500. So the next officer would have kicked into effect.
How many patrol officers, chief, that we have?
So it brings it down to
Sorry, is
13.
that 16 patrol equivalent officers, or is
No,
that
no, we're
16
thir- so
total
we're
officers,
13.
like people
We're
who
at
work for the
13
PD?
patrol equivalent
Got it.
officers. We've added one, so that takes us to 14. So we are still, if we're 8,000 in population, we still don't quite meet this. So
We're shy of two, right?
right, my concern is that if we do codify that we're going to do this and don't do it because we can't afford to do it, and God forbid something happens and somebody says, well, this happened because you didn't have enough officers on your police force that you said you were gonna have.
I think it also
So
allows you
I'm
to,
just concerned about opening ourselves up to that.
In paragraph B, though, it says that the police chief can designate the fact that he certifies that we have adequate.
so we still have the ability to say that we have adequate coverage through the police chief, through his formal recommendation.
But if we're gonna do that, then why even have the ordinance? I guess I'm, you know,
Because what this is doing is basically clarifying that there's, I mean, I hope nobody wrote this in the idea that administrative officers were gonna count towards the overall ratio of officers to residents. This is actually fixing that, and then it's codifying what we're saying those, or who are excluded are. I mean, realistically, the other thing would have just been to do a resolution saying that when it says officers in 180-22A11, that means patrol level officers. You could have done that through a resolution clarifying the ordinance as well. But what this does is further expand that, actually clarifies what those three are, and then also says the police chief can basically override it. So you still have the ability, because there's development that you could possibly say that, yes, we could have that, even though we don't meet the officer count. So the chief could say, yes, we still currently meet the needs of that development. It'd really depend on the size. And the next thing would be is you could use this as a bargaining chip as far as adequate facilities goes, and says, hey, we don't meet the needs of your development that you're trying to do. Obviously, we're gonna have to figure out a way to meet those needs. Again, this
Right, and-
this
and-
opens up a couple different doors. Additional comments, questions, concerns by council?
the other, and one other question, sorry, is that this references section 180. Section 180 is, section 180 of the code is subdivision of land and has nothing to do with police. I don't know,
Chapter 180?
Is it?
That's where the APFO
Yeah, that's
is
where,
embedded.
that's where the adequate facilities is. Go to 180. And it's gonna take you scroll down a little bit.
Oh, okay. Okay, all right, thank you. I wasn't sure how that applied. I didn't read that all the way down, so I wasn't sure how that applied. So thank you, that answered that question.
Going once more, additional comments, questions, concerns by council?
Section A, if the commission determines that the ratio of patrol equivalent officers to citizens is not more than 2 officers per every 1,000 residents, should that be less than or flipped?
It should be not less than.
Yes, I think you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, do we flip that? Does it need to be flipped?
Yeah, it's just confusing. Just say less. It's more plain language.
Okay, Jim, what was your suggested change on it again?
Is not less than 2 officers per
less than.
1,000?
It should be not less than,
Okay.
not more than.
Yeah.
So then, with that, not less than, I am looking for a motion of adoption with, as amended then.
Adopt as amended.
Looking for a second.
Second.
Additional comments, questions, concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, nay.
Opposed?
Carries. So next, we're going to the water and sewer rates ordinance 17-2025, which is going to be the workshop that we've discussed a little bit about. There was no additions. I think we subtracted the one.
There you go.
Thank you. So I know last time we talked about subtracting section 1, making section 2 section 1 because section 1 was redundant. We did that, and everything else remains the same from when it was introduced last week. I'm looking for a motion of adoption on that.
Motion to adopt?
Looking for a second.
Second.
Additional comments, questions, concerns by council? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Sounds good. Did you have a city manager report, or am I good to keep going down?
Nothing really pertinent. Westview Drive's going along as expected. Section 2's, Phase 2's in, and water's being tested. That's about the only update I got. So.
Sounds good. Proceeding down to new business, monthly financial report.
Didn't we do these last week?
No, we saved
We
it for this
pushed
meeting
them
because
so
they
that we
were.
could have a
Okay,
chance to
that's
look
right.
at it.
Thank you.
They didn't get a chance to look at these. So monthly financial report, looking for a motion in regards to it.
Move to accept the financial report.
Looking for a second.
Second.
Additional comments, questions, concerns by council? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Up next, we have accounts payables, looking for a motion in regards to that.
Motion, sorry, what's the motion you're looking for?
Motion,
accept the accounts
motion
payable.
to accept.
Motion to accept.
Looking for a second.
I'll second.
Any additional comments, questions, concerns by council? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Last up, we got ratification of Meadowbrook Section 6 surety reduction. Oh, here it is. Yep.
I saw this come through my email earlier. Can you give me a high level? What is this?
So our standard practice with our with development projects where we are going to accept infrastructure from a development is through our public works agreement. The developer has to post a bond or surety to make sure that the work is completed, and then once the city accepts the infrastructure and the new roads or water and sewer lines and so on become city infrastructure, they're also required to post a maintenance bond for a 2-year period. So in this case with Meadowbrook Section 6, and that's the area around Hibiscus Street and the upper end of Bowie Mill, and where Crimson comes into Bowie Mill, that part of Meadowbrook. That maintenance surety is now 2 years old, so we've gone out, re-inspected everything, gave the developer a punch list of things to fix. He's fixed it. We re-inspected, so we're good to release the maintenance surety because they've fixed everything and basically their warranty period is up.
So you
So-
inspected stuff,
Right.
it passed muster, and the surety's up, so
It's just
Fire,
formalizing
and you're- okay, got
that
it,
we can
got it,
release it
okay.
now. Yeah.
thank you, I appreciate that.
So I will be looking for a motion to ratify the release of the maintenance surety of Meadowbrook Section 6.
So moved.
I'll be looking for a second.
Second.
Any additional comments, questions, concerns by council? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Carries. Up next, we have public comment pertaining to agenda items. Do we have any public comment pertaining to agenda items? Seeing nobody move, I am heading towards adjournment. I'm looking for a motion of adjournment.
So moved.
Looking for a second.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.